My Spanish isn't good enough to ask him in Spanish. Do we have interpretation
Alberto, this
services?
is production. Could you start?
Hello, should we make the announcement?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, I was not able to hear. Thank you, Chair. We'll begin with the announcement in Spanish, and then we will be back with the announcement in English. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etcétera, presione entonces los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are, click on the interpretation icon, World, and select either English or Spanish. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, please press the ellipsis, 3 dots, then Interpretation, and then choose your language. Additionally, to access English, Spanish simultaneous interpretation in the room in person, check out the headset from the receptionist. Gracias, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, let's go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, now, Francesca, did we want to do a roll call as far as attendance?
Yes, please.
Okay, could we do that now?
For the board members, Chair Zito,
Present.
Vice Chair Vasquez,
Here.
and Board Member Musgrove is absent today. For the public members, Agnes Wong Nickerson. Here. Stuart Halpern.
Here.
And Robert Monson.
Here.
Thank you. And that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. With that, we move on to approval of the meeting minutes. Francesca, do we have any public comments on approval of the meeting minutes?
I do see one hand up from the public. Oh, it just went down actually, so I think we do not.
Okay, thank you. With that, do I have any board member comments? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mayor Vasquez, and a second by Board Member Monson. Could you call for the vote?
Thank you very much. Board Member Chair Zito,
Zito, yes.
Vice Chair Vasquez,
Yes.
Public Member Agnes Wong Nickerson,
Yes.
Stuart Halpern,
Yes.
and Robert Monson.
Yes.
Thank you, and that passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. We now move on to agenda item 2, which is public comments and communications and member comments. Do we have any public comments on item 2?
We do. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I'll try to keep it short as possible. I'm new to the area, just settling in. Hi to everyone. This is my second month attending these sort of meetings. I'm just beginning to understand the issues around accounting and the problems that have been taking place around it, possibly. I hope it doesn't hurt yourselves, and I hope you can find ways to work through it. The work that I do with tech accountability and the concepts of racial equity and health and human services ideas, there's good concepts that I think we can organize ourselves around and that can help in a number of ways just offer our better selves and better practices, and offers good ways to offer a roadmap to how to get out of difficult situations, I feel. And so good luck if we want to apply ourselves to those good practices with the trouble that you're in with this issue. And as always, to mention, third party, worker contract issues, if you notice, really can create a lot of trouble a lot of times in life in this country. Good luck how you can address these issues, and good luck to a good roadmap of ideas, that I've described earlier that can really be of help and service in how to get ourselves, work our way out of this sort of situation. Thank you.
Chair, that concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. I guess I'll kick off with a couple of just member comments, one of which is at the board meeting this morning, we did have a presentation of the contracts audit, and staff did a thorough job and went over all the details well, and that was good to see. And Mary gave a really good introduction as well. And there wasn't much discussion, but we also didn't have much time. So I'm not quite sure if that meant, and there were a lot of members absent. As we know, this is the conclusion of election season, and one of the things that was pointed out at the board meeting is, as far as we can tell, there are going to be at least a minimum of 8 new board members this next year because of the outcomes of the elections. And so almost half the board will be turning over. And depending upon how things wrap up at various councils, they could see as many as 10, I would say, new board members. So there's going to be a new dynamic and and some new interesting things going on at the board next year. With that, do any other board members have comments they would like to make at this point in time? Seeing none. Oh, Lloyd, do we know if Mary's here? So I don't see her online. So
Mary's not here, but she did.
Is your comment from her with respect to item 5 or in this section?
Item 5.
Item 5. Okay. So with that, we can go ahead into item number 5, and then do we start with Mary's comment?
Yes.
Okay, Lloyd, I'll let you.
Mary could make it. She sends her apologies. She's picking up her son, finishing up that flight school training. So she prepared a statement for me to make on her behalf. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. These proposed changes on Board Policy 39 being discussed today are important. The IPA has in the past experienced influence and impairment from the board and previous AC chair. Though Chair Zito, Stewart, and other public members have always fought against and helped ensure that OIPA has been able to perform their work without interference, there will not always be a Zito, Stewart, Bob, Agnes, or a Mary Kay present. These changes being proposed will ensure that regardless of who is seated in this position, independence and the ability for the IPA to fulfill their responsibilities and have the independence necessary to ensure SANDAG is accountable and transparent.
Thank you, Lloyd, for presenting those comments by Mary. So going into item 5, I think we know the topic. We talked about it last time. I would like to thank Board Member Halpern. He did the heavy lifting here of going through the language and sending out a bunch of versions that we all heavily debated, and we're going to go over that today and present a couple of points that we still think we would like input from the whole committee, as opposed to presenting a concrete upfront path forward necessarily. And so these are the slides that we have before us. Sorry, yes, with proposed amendments. So Stuart, would you like to walk through them, or would you rather me do it? Okay, so could we go to the next slide? So, and you can see we still have some work in progress stuff going on here. So, but the BP3, the current board policy 39 was adopted a while ago, to say the least. And, you know, we are working in our 4th year of operations as an audit committee under that policy. So after almost 4 years of experience, we see several areas to enhance, you know, overall effectiveness and independence. And these were listed out in the following areas, which Mary also, addressed in her letter, which is just the public member term length, the committee leadership, also potentially including an addition of a public member alternate, and how the public members selection process works. We discussed this at the last meeting, took the feedback and then just tried to come up with some actual more concrete language representations of what this would look like going forward. Next slide, please. So currently, the member term length as a public member and board member term lengths are 2 years, and we think that at least on the public member, it's too short, given Sandag's complexity and learning curve. Specifically, as an example, the board policy right now stipulates that in order for a board member to be appointed, you have to have served 3 years on the board, and that's presumably just so the person has adequate experience and knowledge of Sandag operations in order to make an effective contribution to this particular committee. Other representative agencies in the region, City of San Diego, it's 4-year terms. The Airport Authority is 3-year terms, and the Port Authority is 3-year terms. Next slide, please. So this is the current language. We already discussed the length. I don't think we have to go over that. Can we have the next slide? So what we're proposing is that the term be increased to 3 years, and with a cap on 2 terms, and then at least 2 months prior to the completion of a term, we would also have eligible incumbent members may request reappointment for another term, and it will be the discretion of the selection committee, which we'll discuss later, either to approve such a request or require the full advertisement and selection process to be performed at that point. The other particular item in here that's worth noting is that, again, we would have 6 years, which is 2 full terms, but it's possible that one of those that term length could be lengthened by 1 year in order to make sure that we aren't going to have all public members discharged at the same point in time. So that would be up to the selection committee. So technically, you could have up to a 7-year service just to avoid having loss of all public members at the same time. Next slide. Okay, let's go back then. Sorry. Let's go back to the previous slide. So any comments or thoughts on this particular proposal? I don't know if people have had a chance to read the language, and actually, I guess at this point in time, Francesca, do we have public comments on this particular item?
We do have one public comment, yes.
So why don't we take that now, since we've done the introduction, and then we'll go to board member comments and questions.
All right, Tim, you can go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Not yet. 1 second.
Okay,
Dr. Tim Bylash, Del Mar, California. Just a brief comment that was made this morning about the inclusion of the unincorporated areas into some of the committees. And I just wanted to echo that. And the work of this committee, I think, is very important. So I support the presentations that you make today. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, on this first item about the proposal of the term length, I believe 3 years is what we had suggested last time as well. Any concerns, questions, or thoughts about this particular proposed change? I am seeing none, so I'm going to assume that we're uniformly aligned that this would be a good idea. Next item, next slide, please. So the committee leadership, this is just acknowledging that currently the chair and vice chair of the board are appointed by the chair of the actual full board of Sandag and approved by the Sandag board via a vote. So next slide. The proposal would be to suggest that the audit committee members themselves will select by a majority vote of the committee which members of the audit committee will hold the chair and vice chair position. We're also suggesting that the term be reduced from 2 years to 1 year for that position, although it's not specifically called out in here, although people could serve subsequent terms. It's not limiting people to 1 year. It's just simply saying that the minimum service is 1 year. One of the things that I had required that wasn't uniformly adopted, and so this is an area to look for feedback, is I had suggested that we had put in a requirement here that you should have the length left in your service in order to be appointed to the position, so we don't have to go through a mid-year change in the chair, or specifically for the chair. It could apply to the vice chair as well. So I think we're looking for feedback here. The reason I had suggested that, one of which is I do think that I can speak from personal experience. It does take a little while to get used to the role, and having a mid-year change is a little bit chaotic. It does take a while to build relationships with staff and the board leadership. And so I do think that if we were to have multiple chair rotations within a single year, that would be disadvantageous. So I had suggested that, we should be able to, for someone to be nominated, that they should have at least be able to serve the remainder of the term. That won't be an issue for board members who might be up, because the process is synchronized with respect to when we're doing this selection. It's only an issue for public members that may come in the middle of the year, and their term's going to be up in the middle of the year then. And so we might have to deal with it then. So looking for feedback. Bob.
Just real quick, I am in agreement with you, Chair. All I remember is when I first came here, it took about a year for me to really understand, and I'm still not completely understanding all the complexities of Sandag and the relationship of this group with the rest of the management. So I would agree. I think whoever is nominated should have at least 1 year under their belts.
Oh, sorry. I want to be clear. This is not 1 year under the belt.
Okay.
You could put a brand new person up. I'm just saying the person who's nominated should be able to serve the full year term.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
So you don't have a new leadership elected, for example, mid-year.
Okay.
And
that
again,
was my fault.
yeah, that's okay. And well, no, it's
Misunderstood.
my fault because
Even though I do think that especially as a chair or vice chair of this committee, you should have a fairly good knowledge of Sandag and how it operates. That's why I kind of still feel that there should be a requirement that whoever is nominated should have been in this committee at least a year. And that may be difficult to impose. I don't know, but that's
okay.
That's my thinking.
It's good feedback. Other thoughts, Stuart?
I actually think that's a pretty good idea. I think, one of the issues with both what's up there now and this concept is it's a 5-person committee, right? So you don't have a lot of people to choose from. And then when you layer on top of that, and this is one of the reasons why, just for sake of full disclosure, the chair and I had a little back and forth about this requirement. As it is now, at least, all of the public members' terms, just by the quirk of fate of when this was all adopted, are June terms, right? And so there are going to be some years where we're going to have, based on the staggering, we're going to have 2 public members' terms expiring 6 months from when this decision gets made. And we may also have, I don't know if it's every 3rd year, I haven't done the math, a scenario where at the same time you may have the 3rd public member only having been on the committee for a year. To your point, is sort of for 6 months, to your point, will be sort of a new person. So then it's really 2 of those 3 would be excluded from consideration, and one of the 3 is just sort of a newbie that you might not want to have. So by your sort of de facto limiting the full consideration of the public members, which, look, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I think if we get any of these changes done, we will have moved the ball forward. So I wouldn't pound the table on it. But I think you may actually make a really interesting point. Having said that, I think, current chair and vice chair had not had prior service on the committee, have done a pretty great job. So we could all hope that we continue to be as lucky in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Although we did benefit from more than 3 years of Sandag experience.
Right.
Just so that is the one thing that we do have, which the public members don't. Yes, Agnes.
I'm wondering if you make it so complicated that a lot of way to qualify members. This is a whole idea, I know we haven't talked about that. If it's the chair will be voted on.
Okay, well, Vice Chair, do you have any direct input? Because I'm getting the feedback we would just leave these requirements out and let the audit committee sort it out. Do you have any thoughts or contrary opinions?
I kind of feel like there's some extra layers added here. And we would most likely want to try and keep this as simple as possible. I believe that we come to Sandag with a certain level of leadership experience, and that leadership experience can carry over into anything that we do. And so at this time, I'm pretty much in agreement with you, Agnes, on this. And I say we just kind of leave this particular section alone.
Great. So the green, we just want to adopt the green stuff if we go that route, Bob.
And
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to what I'd said before, and I'm fine with what Agnes and what Mayor Vasquez has said. I'm fine with just leaving these.
Great. Thank you. So let's move on to the next slide. So the addition of a public member alternate, I think we're all aware right now, we do have a board member alternate that serves on this committee. This would be a public member, and to provide some context, this was my contribution as far as something to talk about, which is around how we can potentially maintain more institutional knowledge within the committee going forward too, just so somebody can actually continue to participate, perhaps, that has a lot of knowledge in case we run into a situation where a lot of public members are retiring very close to each other. So specifically that, this is just saying a public member shall also be selected pursuant to the section that we will be going over shortly. The public member alternate shall be chosen by the selection committee among prior public members. So the intent would be to try to have one of the prior public members, and that should no prior public member volunteer, the selection committee will select a member from finalists per the section that we are going to be reviewing shortly. So the intent here is again that we would have a public member, strong preference, and we would work towards having a prior voting regular full-time public member in that position as alternate. We probably, although I'll leave this up to staff if and when we manage to get this to move forward, probably will need to include language in here saying that the term limit length doesn't apply to the public member, just to be clear. We probably should do that. But again, the intent here is to just allow for institutional knowledge to spread itself out over time and not necessarily be lost in a big wave. And so thoughts or any other comments there? Look good? Okay, next slide, please. So this is where it's going to get a little bit complicated. This is the current process. The current process, to quickly review, is that when there's a vacancy from a public member, we do advertise for new public members, and then it talks about the experience. Let's go to the next slide. And the process is possibly, ooh, wow. You can see it's a lot of text, but basically the process consists of having a group that's selected by the chair of the board, partially from a board member. So the chair of the board selects a board member, the chief financial officer or finance director of a Sandag member agency, which in practice has turned into occasionally being the actual Sandag CFO, and then outside financial expert appointed by the other two members of the screening committee and confirmed by the board. So this is the screening committee, and they basically get to decide how things work from there on out. They can do interviews, they can do whatever they want, but basically they get to present their nominee for the public member, which is then ultimately voted on by the board. So next slide, please. Gets a little complicated here because we have two alternatives that we want to discuss. And oddity of presentation, alternative A is is the one that's a little bit further away than what we talked about last time. And alternative B should sound like what we talked about last time. So alternative A would be the kind of came up because we were trying to optimize what looked like a two-step process to be a little bit more efficient. But the comment made by Mary as the IPA was perhaps it's not as independent because of the involvement of Sandag officials throughout most of the process. So let's just walk through it. The selection committee is convened. It's comprised of a sitting board member of the audit committee, a sitting public member of the audit committee, the IPA, and the CFO of Sandag. That selection committee scores applicants against criteria which are informed by the policies that we go by and agreed upon by the audit committee. Then the selection committee may choose a certain subset of those applicants to interview. And for the interviews, the IPA and CFO recuse themselves for the interview phase, potentially. And that's why it's in there as a question. And then the applicants are scored based upon their interviews as well and added into the original scoring. And then, relative to the conversation that we had last time, if the scores are within 20% of the top scoring individual, all those names go into a hat. And then, we have a random draw of who actually gets selected for the audit committee. So yes. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
By way of elaboration, that 20, I think, Bob, you'd mentioned you like the random draw thing at the end. The 20% was something I threw in because just in thinking about this, if there's a really wide range between the top score and the bottom score, maybe the bottom score is still technically qualified, but if there's a really wide range, do you really want to have a random draw actually end up picking the least of the least qualified of qualified people? So that's kind of where that came from. And we thought, well, maybe if we put some band so that you're reducing the choices to the top quadrant or whatever, if you will, or what's top 20 percentile or quintile or whatever of those qualified, you're eliminating that potential sort of shortfall of that process. That's where it came from. But maybe that, I don't know if that strikes you guys as overly complicated, or Mayor Vasquez as a board member looking at this for the first time, if it'll strike you that board members may see this as overly complicated, but that's where it came from.
So mull over that, and then we'll go over to alternative B, which is the next slide, please. Oh, sure, Agnes.
So can someone explain to me the random selection part?
Well, yeah, where it comes from is that if you screen for qualifications and you've deemed everyone qualified, let's put aside the 20% thing, but if you've got a pool of people who are qualified, then why should you go through any kind of further subjective selection? If people are qualified for sake of independence, lack of political interference, et cetera, if they're all qualified, just pick one. That's the concept. And it was actually when I was on the ITAC and we did the triennial performance review last time, the consultant looked at this question of the ITAC selection and they said, this is something you could consider. So it wasn't any one of our ideas. It was actually from, I don't know if you're familiar with the Joburg firm. They're the folks who did that, who were government audit consultants. Anyway, that's the concept.
It's just an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, it was, again, Stuart brought it up from his experience. And again, if we're out there trying to demonstrate that this is as independent of a committee as it can be, allowing random selection of qualified candidates is truly a good way to go about it. Nobody can say, oh, you planned that person to be there, and that's a plant. This is Mary's plant, or this is the chair of the board's plant, to advocate for their positions, right? You can't say that because it was a random draw. That's part of the philosophy. Just truly show some independence and recognition that, and then also from personal experience, just recognition of the fact that we humans are fallible. And I don't know that we do a much better job actually selecting a top candidate out of qualified candidates often than a random draw will. I mean, I've been in industry for 30 years and I think the classic example that everybody likes to point to is Tom Brady. He was like, the 350th person picked in a draw and is now the best quarterback of all time, right? You can find some good people and they're accidentally. So let's go over alternative B. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide. We didn't insert the proposed language for that. So on alternative B, it'll appear a little bit more heavy. It does involve an additional individual, which makes it more heavy. And then it's effectively a two-step process. It's a first step as a selection committee is convened comprising of a sitting board member or board member alternate of the audit committee, a sitting public member or alternate of the audit committee, the IPA, the CFO of Sandag, and a finance director of a Sandag member agency. So we throw in another finance director in this particular one of a member agency. A subset of that committee, which is comprised of the Sandag CFO and the Sandag IPA, and a chosen public member will screen the submitted applications for minimum requirements of the position. So the intention of this step is to clearly state, like, okay, no, it's hard for me not to make political commentary here. Okay, Donald Trump applied, we're just kicking him out. Sorry about that. But so it's just, this person is clearly not qualified. They do not have minimum thresholds. And so that subset, their entire role is to screen the applicants that have applied. And if they kick any out, they will simply document the objective criteria that were not met by that candidate. This candidate should not move on because of this objective criteria that wasn't met. The remaining candidates then get scored by the following members of the selection committee: the Sandag board member alternate, the public member alternate, and the finance director of a Sandag member agency. And so you can tell this particular step doesn't involve Sandag staff at this point. Then, based upon the scoring results, a subset of applicants may be chosen to be interviewed by the selection committee, and the results of the interviews will be incorporated into the overall scoring. Applicant scoring again, you get the same thing. At this point, it's the same. You just look at the scores, if you're within the top 20%, and the actual person selected will be done by a random draw of sorts. So the end part is the same. It's just a matter of how you get there. So any questions on this particular process first? Bob.
So just some clarification. So looks to me the difference between A and B, number one, is the fact that you have the CFO of Sandag IPA, and a chosen public member does the initial screening. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would flip it around to be saying the way I view the primary difference between the two is in alternative B, you do not have any Sandag staff, either the CFO or the IPA, if you consider the IPA Sandag staff, which isn't necessarily true, but they have their own objectives, participating in scoring or ranking the applicants, right? In this one, it's, in the previous one, both the CFO and the IPA were scoring and ranking the applicants along with the other members. And this one, all they get to do is, based upon their knowledge of agency operations, disqualify people that can't be committed, but they aren't actually scoring, can't be considered, sorry, but they aren't actually scoring anybody, and thus have no influence on the relative rankings and no influence on deciding who gets interviewed or the outcomes of the interview. So that's the primary difference between the two approaches. This was the approach as it was sort of described last time, and that was because, again, this was the one that Mary had thought was that demonstrated more independence, but that was also kind of before we had settled in on, we really want to try this random draw thing, and so maybe the other approach, alternative A, has a greater efficiency and less overhead and would be more preferred at this point. But we're, again, looking for input on either one at this point on which one we would like to move forward with, alternative A or alternative B. And yeah, Stuart, go ahead.
Just to throw something back into the mix based on Agnes's prior comment. We talked about this random draw as the final step, partly because when we were all talking, you said, oh, I like that. If part of your reaction is, why isn't it just the top scoring person? at the end of the process. I mean, you know, there's a certain logic to that too. And maybe to put the mayor on the spot a little bit, you know, I realize this does sound pretty complicated. And I'm also really curious, and as well, Chair, you know, imagine yourselves as board members not having sat through all this. Is there one or the other permutation of this just simply going to be more digestible and enhance the prospects of actually moving forward? Because the last thing we want to do is make this sound so complicated that people are going to look at it and think, oh, God, you know, this is just too complicated. I don't know if that, I mean, I think just being practical, we want to try to make some improvement. And so if you guys have opinions as to what you think has the highest likelihood of success, I'd be totally behind that, almost regardless of the permutation, personally.
Would you like to go first? As you're a voting board member and I'm an alternate? I mean, I'm happy to express my opinion, but I've been more involved in this. So you're the one who gets to look at this for the first time. But yeah.
So when I look at alternative A versus alternative B, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like with alternative B, there's an added layer. Is that correct? My question is, what is the benefit of that added layer? I'd like to really see the benefit of that added layer.
Yeah, so the perceived benefit, again, the way that alternative B was what we talked about last time, was demonstrating to the best of our ability the true independence of the committee and the independence of this process of selecting committee members from influence, from improper influence, for lack of a better term, but influence of staff members of Sandag or even, you know, other people that are working on Sandag. And I think some of that has been mitigated. I personally think some of that has been mitigated if we're willing to move forward with a random draw selection, because that, you know, at that point, you can say someone's pushing this particular angle, but they're not guaranteed that because you get a random draw. So I think we've mitigated some of that. And so, yeah, there is that overhead. And, you know, I would stipulate to your point, I mean, yes, the more straightforward something is to internalize and digest, the more likely it is to be adopted. But once again, there are other ways to accomplish that too. But that may happen. I don't. If you look at the board, how the board operates, I would be surprised if half the members perhaps might have even fully tried to internalize either option before they had to vote on it. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mayor Vasquez. Is there anything else you wanted to throw in there?
Oh, I was just trying to, because I think sometimes we have to keep it simple, but I do understand that you want to make sure that this is a fair and equitable process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of feel like if I had to choose between the two, alternative A would probably be the better way to go. Just note that I think this is one step forward in refining the process. This could always come back for more modifications.
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, yeah. We may not be done.
Yeah. You know, the one thing that is perfect is imperfection. And so I don't see this as the last conversation here, but I think alternative A might be a step in the right direction.
Thank you for those comments. Very well put. So yeah, and you know, as you may be gathering, simply because I've made the comment a couple times about the random selection. I mean, my instinct, and I'm worried about saying this because I don't want people to be unduly influenced as the chair trying to push for something, but it would be that we go forward with alternative A and then see what comes out. as well, but I'm still willing to hear other inputs as well.
Just because when I first went through this, I have to admit that I was really leaning towards alternative B.
Yeah.
Because again, full transparency, but then listening to Mayor Vasquez and Chair Zito and Stewart, I started thinking and said, "Oh, do we really need that extra layer in there?" If I understood alternative A, Sandag, CFO, and the IPA would still be involved, correct?
And B, you mean?
I'm sorry, don't they have involvement in A though?
Yeah, they have involvement in
Yeah,
both.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm
In
saying
A, they're more
alternative A,
involved.
they're still being involved.
Yeah.
It just seems to me A still gets us where we want to be. My biggest thing is the random selection. I would be honest. I like that concept. And as long as we're not including everyone in that process, all the applicants get thrown into a pot and, whoever comes out, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. That's why I like the 20%. Should we go even lower, 10%? I don't know. But I'm fine with leaving it at 20% for right now.
For now.
So I'm leaning towards alternative A.
Okay, thanks. Anything else to add, Ms. Wong Nickerson, or you good, or board member?
Yeah, I think I also think A is simpler than B. In the spirit of simplicity, I think, I would go with A. I'm okay with the random selection, is not what I would prefer to do, but I'm also, willing to support that too.
Okay, great, thank you, I appreciate it. So at this point, I've forgotten, oh, sorry, Stuart.
Well, I just want to throw in a procedural point. I'm guessing you might bring this up, Emerlyn, if we don't cover this. This deck didn't include the specific proposed language for the selection process, I think. But that actually was provided, because I'm guessing you might say we can make the motion, but we actually need to have the committee have reviewed the specific language in order to take this forward. Is that?
That is correct. In order to be a true recommendation for an amendment to the executive committee, we do need to know the precise language that's being recommended. However, if the language that's being recommended as an edit to board policy 39 is what is set forth here and becomes part of the motion, then we would be able to move that forward. But if you do foresee that you want to wordsmith a little bit more around these concepts, then I would recommend that there be a red line version that truly reflects the audit committee's proposed recommendation that goes to the executive committee.
Well, I actually did the red line version. It didn't make it into this particular deck, and maybe there was some confusion between Mary or whomever. Is there somebody I can forward to it now and just put it up on the screen so we get this covered? I don't. If you don't think this is the right way to go, I just don't want us to be in a position where it's great, we had this meeting, you all made a lot of effort to make this happen, but it's like, whoops, doesn't really count.
I didn't notice that it wasn't the right slide either in that regards, but yes, if
Who
that
should I
makes
forward
sense,
this
can you
to?
forward that to somebody and actually have us review that?
If you could send it to production@sandag.org.
Thank you.
Sorry for this. Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember, where are we at on the slides here? Can we go to the next slide while we're waiting on this? I kind of can. Yes, I figured. I'm trying to remember what's next. I guess I can go launch into the staff report.
So that was sent to production. I don't know if you've received it or not.
So while I can give a couple other updates just for,
It's also a municipality. Yeah, it's not so.
You had to that, it's the same item. It's the same item. I should have talked, just 2 seconds.
This one?
I think if you, one prior to this would show the, right? Sorry, go next.
So I can't go back.
They took my comment before they,
Yes,
this
okay.
part of the thing, so, all right.
Would you mind sending me an email and I'll distribute it to them? Thank you.
and for the purpose of this discussion, I would just presume we strike the green highlighted text. So this is the proposed language that we were talking about if we would go with alternative A and just strike the green highlighted text.
The question that was raised is, does this work from a process perspective? So long as we have the precise wording that's being recommended by the audit committee, we can work with that. But again, if you would prefer to see it in the full red line version, we can bring that back as well.
Okay. So I think presuming move forward, this would be the language that we're suggesting at this point in time. So then going forward, thank you again for that production. So going forward to this is just more cleanup of that language. And then alternative B, we aren't looking at, so keep going forward. We're going to go to board member terms. Keep going forward. Thank you. Okay, cleanup of board member terms. So this is just to, again, change the board members to be comparable to the public members as well, which is to have a no more than 6 year service on the audit committee, which is what the proposal is for the public members. And like the public members, also allow them to reapply after a hiatus of a full term. So right now, I think it's both public members and board members, it's ad infinitum. But now, if you've been gone a full term, for public members, that's 3 years. For board members, that's 2 years. You'd be able to reapply. Any other comments on that? Okay, next slide, please, if there is one. Okay, so this would be a point to, hear any last comments on this and maybe settle in on a motion. I did want to make a couple other comments just of things that have been going on, so we're all aware of what's happening here. One item that once the knowledge of this effort became more generally aware, I did have the chair of the board, Catherine, approach me and say, hey, want to learn more about this. And, my idea and her recommendation was that at today's board meeting, they have an item where they appointed a subcommittee of the board to work with us on finalizing potential options and seeing what the path will be going forward. But us, Stuart, myself, and Mary decided we would just continue with the current process for now and go forward with our recommendation. I just wanted to raise that largely because the board, relative to the lead-in that Mayor Vasquez gave, the board very well may come back and say, hey, no, we want you to work with a couple of these members and to further refine the language, because it's already happened once. So I just want to be clear that that could happen again. The other thing that I think is worth noting is it does appear that for probably multiple reasons, all board meetings in December have been canceled at this point, including the executive meeting. So the earliest opportunity for this to be brought before the executive committee, I would assume, would be the January meeting at that point, and then we would be, potentially hearing from the outcome of that executive committee in our January meeting, if we still hold ours, which I think, given we're missing December, we'll have enough to hold a January meeting, but I don't know for sure. So I wanted to give those 2 points of context, is because the original thought had been trying to put this on the December executive committee meeting, but there is no December executive committee meeting at this point. The first one will be January, so that'll be the first opportunity for the executive committee to hear this and think of a path forward. And to be perfectly honest, staff might be able to clarify. I have no idea who's going to be running that meeting, because pretty much all the board leadership seems to be rotating over, and I don't know if they'll have had an opportunity to nominate the new board leadership yet. But yeah, okay.
No, it's a great question.
Yes.
We do anticipate that if the January meeting is held, the vice chair would likely lead that meeting.
Okay. That would be helpful.
And just to further fill in some information, the board leadership elections are set to be held at the first meeting on January 12th as well.
Right. That'll be interesting. Stay tuned. I'll be watching. It should be interesting. Okay. So with that, I'm open to further discussion or any other further comments, or happy to receive a motion. If people are nervous, I'm happy to make the motion based upon what I've heard here today so far.
I'm going to make a motion.
Okay.
A motion, as it's stated on the screen, recommend that Sandag Board of Directors accept the recommendation of the Audit Committee and the IPA to amend Board Policy 39 as proposed above with regard to public member term length, committee leadership, addition of a public member alternate, public member selection process, Alternative A.
That's right.
And board member term length.
Great, thank you. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Vasquez. Any further discussion? Stuart.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to the chair, we all pushed pretty hard to make this happen, and to the staff, everybody really made a huge effort to get this done in hopes that we would be able to get it to the full board before they cancel the meetings. But I really want to thank everybody. Also to say that, again, with the chair, you've shown tremendous patience during this process. There's a lot of inertia around the status quo. And some might say this whole exercise is somewhat quixotic, but hopefully people, when it gets to the new board, will recognize that, especially if Mayor were here, there's over 100 years of audit and audit-related experience, and we're all just trying to make suggestions to make the agency in this process better, and hopefully people recognize that. But particularly appreciate all the work and patience you've shown.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Stuart. I appreciate it. And I've I appreciate all your effort in helping get us to this point as well. It's I think, a valuable contribution that we're going to make, and I'm hopeful we'll be able to push a good part of it, if not all of it, through in the upcoming year. With that, I was going to call for the vote.
Thank you. For the board members, Chair Zito,
Zito, yes.
Vice Chair Vasquez.
Yes.
For the public members, Agnes Wong Nickerson,
Yes.
Stuart Halpern,
Yes.
Robert Monson.
Yes.
Thank you. And that item passes unanimously.
And that concludes the agenda we had for today. Our next upcoming meeting is scheduled for Friday, January 13th, 2023. Make sure you wear all your good luck charms that day. And I do want to say one more time, thanks to all of the members for making themselves available today, and thanks to staff, because I do know that fitting in this third meeting, as well as fitting in another meeting for the audit committee, was not easy, so I appreciate it. With that, we're adjourned.
I was going to say, so is it,
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
but is it the case that this may be the last meeting for our chair and vice chair? Based on the procedure you were describing with the board?
The board leadership elections are held in January, and then the board selects the chair and vice chair of the committees typically in February.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah,
for-
if
for
we
your
hold a meeting,
service.
thank you. If we hold a meeting in January, I'll still be here.
Okay.
For that meeting. So you'll get a chance to egg me then.